The notification came at 6:47 inches the morning, while I was still in my robe pouring the first cup of coffee I hadn't yet earned. My phone buzzed on the counter. I assumed it was my sister. I assumed it was nothing. I picked it up anyway. It was an automated alert from my company's benefits portal. The subject line read, "Beneficiary update confirmed action taken on your account." I set my coffee down. I had not updated anything. I opened the email. It told me that a change to the primary beneficiary on my 401, the retirement account I had been contributing to for 11 years, the one sitting at just over $340,000, had been successfully processed the previous evening. The new primary beneficiary was listed as my ex-husband. His name was right there on my screen. 7 letters I had spent the better part of 2 years trying to stop seeing everywhere. My divorce had been finalized 4 months ago. I had initialed 37 pages of a settlement agreement. I had a signed court order, and somehow, his name was now first in line for everything I had spent a decade building. I did not call him. I want to be clear about that. Every instinct I had from the 2 years before the divorce told me to call him, to ask what was happening, to give him a chance to explain. I had spent those 2 years making that mistake over and over. I did not make it that morning. I called my HR department instead. The office didn't open until 8. I sat at my kitchen table for 73 minutes with my phone face up in front of me and my coffee going cold, reading the email 4 times, then 5, then 6, trying to find the part where I had misread it. I had not misread it. At 7:58, I was already in my car. At 8:04, I was in the lobby of my company's building. And at 8:09, I was standing at the front desk of the HR suite on the 4th floor asking for the benefits coordinator. The woman at the desk, who I recognized but had never spoken to directly, told me her name was Donna and asked if I had an appointment. I told her I did not. I told her I needed to speak with someone about my retirement account immediately. I kept my voice even. I had practiced keeping my voice even for 2 years. It was one of the few useful things that marriage had given me. Donna picked up her phone and made a call I couldn't fully hear. A minute later, she told me that the senior benefits manager, a man named Carl, could see me in 10 minutes. I sat in one of the chairs along the wall. I did not look at my phone. I watched the door. Carl came out himself rather than sending someone to get me, which I noticed. He was in his mid-50s, gray at the temples, and he had the careful expression of someone who already knew why I was there. He extended his hand and told me his name and asked me to come on back. His office was small and orderly, 2 chairs across from his desk, a monitor angled slightly toward him. He gestured to one of the chairs. I sat. He sat. He folded his hands on the desk and looked at me directly. He said, "You received the beneficiary confirmation email." It wasn't a question. I said yes. He said, "I was actually going to reach out to you today. Our system flagged the submission for review this morning." I asked him what he meant by flagged. He turned his monitor slightly toward me, just enough that I could see the screen without having to lean forward. He pulled up what looked like a submission log, rows of data, timestamps, file names. He pointed to one line near the top. He said, "This change request was submitted through the employee self-service portal at 11:52 p.m. on Tuesday night." I looked at the timestamp. 11:52 p.m. I told him I had been asleep at 11:52 p.m. on Tuesday night. I told him I had not touched my benefits portal in over a year, not since I updated my address after the divorce. He nodded slowly. He said, "The system processed it automatically because it met the basic format requirements. But when our compliance tool ran its nightly audit, it flagged 2 things." He paused. The first was the submission time. Changes made between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. are automatically held for manual review. The second was the IP address the submission came from. I asked him what that meant. He said the IP address was not one associated with my profile. Every time an employee logs into the portal, the system logs their IP. Mine was consistent, my home network. Occasionally my phone's carrier data. The submission on Tuesday night came from an IP address that did not match any login in my history. I sat with that for a moment. I asked him if someone else had logged into my account. He said the login had used my credentials, my email, my password, but the location of the device was different. I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't quite calm and wasn't quite anger. It was more like the feeling of recognizing something you'd been trying not to see. I knew exactly when I had given my ex-husband my benefits portal password. It was 3 years ago, when we were still married, and he had offered to help me update my life insurance beneficiaries because I kept putting it off. I had written the password on a sticky note and left it on his desk. I had never changed it after that. Not before the divorce, and God help me. Not after. I told Carl that. He didn't react with judgment. He just nodded and made a note. He asked if I wanted to walk him through the timeline of my divorce and whether there was a court order related to financial accounts. I had brought a copy of it. I had grabbed it from the folder in my filing cabinet on my way out the door at 7:58 that morning. Some part of my brain already knowing I would need it. I slid it across the desk. He picked it up and read through the relevant section, and I watched his expression change just slightly, not dramatically, but enough. The order was specific. All retirement and investment accounts were to remain in the name of the individual account holder. My ex-husband had waived any claim to my 401 in writing, on a document signed by both of us and stamped by a family court judge in Harris County. Carl set the order down. He said, "This supersedes any beneficiary designation." I said I knew that. I said I wanted to know how to make sure the designation was reversed and how to make sure this could not happen again. He said he was already working on both. What happened in the next 40 minutes was methodical in a way I found unexpectedly stabilizing. Carl walked me through the process of submitting a formal dispute on the beneficiary change, which he initiated from his side of the desk with me present. He pulled up the original submission and showed me the document that had been uploaded alongside it, a scanned form, a standard beneficiary update document, with my signature on it. I looked at the signature. I told him that was not my signature. He zoomed in. I leaned forward. The signature had my name, but the way the letters moved was wrong. The loop on the Y at the end was too wide. The way the first letters started was different from how I've written it my entire adult life. It was close. It was meant to be close. But it wasn't mine. Carl asked if I would be willing to provide a signature sample for documentation purposes. I said yes. He slid a piece of paper across the desk and I signed my name 3 times in a row. He photographed it with his phone and attached it to the case file he was building. He said, "I want to show you something else." He switched windows. He pulled up a metadata panel for the uploaded document. I am not a technical person. I do not work in IT. But Carl walked me through it slowly, and what it showed was this. The document had been created digitally, not scanned from an original paper form. The file metadata listed the creation date as 9:14 p.m. on Tuesday night, 3 hours before it was submitted. The software used to create it was a PDF editing program. The device was a Windows laptop. I did not own a Windows laptop. I had a MacBook. I had owned a MacBook for 6 years. My ex-husband had a Windows laptop. He had bought it 2 years ago. I remembered because I had helped him set it up. I said that out loud. I said it quietly, more to myself than to Carl, but he heard me and he wrote it down. He asked me if I wanted to file a formal fraud report with the company's legal and compliance team. He said it would trigger an internal investigation and potentially involve law enforcement. I said yes. He picked up his desk phone and made a call. He spoke briefly to someone I couldn't hear and then told me that the compliance officer would be joining us shortly and that in the meantime, the beneficiary change had been reversed and my account had been flagged with a security hold, meaning no further changes could be made without in-person verification at the HR office with 2 forms of ID. I sat back in my chair. I realized my hands were shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the sustained effort of staying composed for the last 90 minutes. I pressed them flat against my thighs and breathed. The compliance officer arrived 12 minutes later. Her name was Patricia, and she was direct and efficient in a way that I found enormously reassuring. She sat in the other chair across from Carl's desk, and she asked me to walk her through everything from the beginning. I did. I told her about the email, the timestamp, the IP address, the signature, the metadata, the Windows laptop, the password on the sticky note I had written 3 years ago and never changed. She took notes the entire time. When I finished, she looked up and said, "Do you have any documentation of the divorce settlement? Specifically the section covering retirement accounts?" Carl handed her the copy he'd already been reviewing. She read it, and then she did something Carl had not done. She photographed it with her work phone and sent it to herself. She said, "I want to be honest with you about where this goes from here." She set down her pen. "Internally, we will submit this to our legal team. The beneficiary change will remain reversed. Your account will stay under the security hold until you personally request its removal. As for the outside piece, the potential criminal piece that's not ours to pursue, what we can do is provide documentation to law enforcement if they request it, and I would strongly recommend that you file a police report today." I asked her what charge this would fall under. She said that was a question for law enforcement, but that in her experience, submitting a forged document to obtain financial benefit, particularly in violation of a court order, was the kind of thing prosecutors took seriously. I asked her if I needed an attorney. She said she could not advise me on that, but that she personally would want one in my position. I left the HR office at 10:23 a.m. with a printed copy of the case number Carl had assigned to my complaint, a printed summary of the beneficiary change submission with timestamps and IP data, and Patricia's direct phone number on a business card she pressed into my hand at the door. She told me to call her if anyone from outside the company tried to contact my benefits account. I thanked her. She said, "You did the right thing coming in immediately. That matters in these situations." I drove to a coffee shop 2 blocks from my office. I sat in the parking lot, and I finally let myself feel it. Not the anger, not yet, but the staggering, exhausting sadness of it. The divorce had not been my choice. I had tried for 2 years to hold something together that my ex-husband was quietly dismantling. I had cried in the parking lots of grocery stores and called my sister from work, bathroom stalls, and sat in a therapist's office every other Thursday for 14 months. I had done all of that, and I had gotten through it, and I had built this small, quiet life on the other side of it. And he had still 4 months after a judge made it official. 4 months after I thought it was over, he had still found a way to reach into it. I allowed myself 5 minutes. Then I called my attorney. My attorney's name is Janet, and she is not the kind of person who wastes words. I told her what had happened. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Forward me everything HR sent you. Don't contact your ex-husband. File the police report today, not tomorrow. I'll call you this afternoon." I asked her how bad this was. She said, "This is actually better than a lot of cases I see. You have documentation, a court order, technical evidence, and a corporate entity willing to cooperate. The question is whether he was stupid enough to do this from his own device on his own network." Given what Carl had shown me, I thought the answer to that question might be yes. I filed the police report at 1:15 p.m. at the district station 6 blocks from my apartment. The detective who took my report, a woman with short hair and a methodical way of asking questions, listened to everything and then asked me to send the HR documentation to the case email she gave me. She told me that financial fraud cases involving forged documents and court order violations were elevated on the priority scale. She did not make promises. She told me they would be in touch. My attorney called at 3:47 p.m. She had reviewed the documentation. She had already spoken, informally, with a colleague who handled white-collar criminal cases. She said, "What your ex-husband did constitutes, at minimum, identity fraud, forgery of a financial document, and contempt of a court order. Depending on how the DA wants to pursue it, there's a reasonable argument for felony financial fraud given the amount involved." I asked her what that meant practically. She said it meant she was filing an emergency motion to have him held in contempt of the court order by the end of the week, and that the criminal side would move on its own timeline, but that the contempt motion would have immediate civil consequences and could affect the terms of the settlement if the judge decided to revisit it. I sat down on my couch. I said, "He actually thought this would work." Janet was quiet for a second. Then she said, "They usually do." The contempt motion was filed on Friday. The following Tuesday, my ex-husband was served at his apartment. His attorney called Janet the next morning. By the end of that call, he was offering to sign an additional agreement waiving any future claim to any financial account in my name, in perpetuity, in exchange for my agreement not to pursue the contempt hearing. Janet called me and relayed the offer. She said the decision was mine. I thought about it for exactly 1 day. I told her I wanted the agreement, and I wanted the criminal case to proceed regardless. The agreement was civil. The forgery and the contempt were something else, and they were not mine to let go of. A judge had signed an order. He had decided that order didn't apply to him. That wasn't between me and him anymore. Janet said, "Good." The criminal case moved slowly, the way those things do. But it moved. 4 months after that Tuesday morning, when I stood in my kitchen in my robe reading an email I wasn't supposed to have to receive, my ex-husband's attorney negotiated a plea agreement with the district attorney's office. He pleaded guilty to 1 count of forgery of a financial instrument and 1 count of criminal contempt of a court order. He was sentenced to 2 years of probation, required to complete a financial fraud intervention program, and ordered to pay restitution to cover my legal fees, which by that point were substantial. He did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that because I know it's what people want to hear, and I know the absence of it can feel like failure. It didn't feel like failure to me. What it felt like was a verdict. It felt like a system that I had been terrified would ignore me, actually working the way it was supposed to work, slowly, imperfectly, bureaucratically, but working. I also changed my passwords, every single one of them. On the same day, I walked out of Carl's office with that case number in my hand. I changed my benefits portal password. I changed my email. I changed my banking app. I set up two-factor authentication on every financial account I owned. I called my bank and asked them to flag my account for manual review on any changes to beneficiaries or authorized users. The woman on the phone said they could do that. I asked her why they didn't do it automatically. She said they could add it as a preference if I requested it. I requested it. There are things I wish I had done differently. I wish I had changed that password the day I moved out of the house we shared. I wish I had done a full audit of every account, every portal, every subscription, every automatic login I had ever shared with him. I wish I had understood at the time that divorce is not just an emotional process, it is an administrative one. And the administrative piece is where people who mean you harm will look for the gaps you left open. I didn't know that then. I know it now. What I also know is this. I walked into that HR office on a Tuesday morning with a printed court order and a willingness to say out loud that something was wrong. And I walked out with a case number and a plan. I did not wait. I did not give him a chance to explain or apologize or reframe it. I did not decide his intentions were probably innocent. I had learned, across 2 years of marriage and 4 months of trying to exist on the other side of it, that his intentions were not the variable I needed to be calculating. The variable was the evidence. The variable was the documentation. The variable was the timestamp at 11:52 p.m. and the IP address that wasn't mine and the metadata on a PDF that he created on his Windows laptop 3 hours before he submitted it using a password I had written on a sticky note and left on his desk in a life I no longer lived. Those things were true whether I wanted them to be or not, and they were enough. If there is anyone listening to this who has recently gone through a divorce, or is going through one now, or is anywhere near the end of something that was supposed to be permanent, please hear this part. Go through every account, every single one, every financial portal, every insurance policy, every retirement account, every utility, every subscription. Remove any access you ever gave. Change every password you ever shared. Add verification layers wherever the system will let you. Do it before you need to. Do it even if you think you can trust the person you're separating from. I thought I could trust mine. I was wrong about that in the way that only 4 months of distance and a 6:47 a.m. email can make completely clear. But I went to HR at 8 in the morning. I brought the court order. I sat across from Carl and Patricia and I said, "This is not my signature, and this is not my laptop, and I need you to help me prove it." And they did. That's the part that still gets me. Honestly, not the betrayal. Because by the time that email arrived, I had already survived the larger version of it. What gets me is that the system worked. The compliance tool ran its nightly audit. The IP address didn't match. Carl was in his office at 8:09 the morning and he turned his monitor toward me and showed me the evidence before I even knew there was evidence to find. I did not do this alone. I want to say that clearly. I had Carl and Patricia and Janet and a detective with short hair who took careful notes and asked the right questions. I had a court order signed by a judge and a corporate compliance team that took their own rules seriously. I had systems that were, for once, on my side. All I had to do was walk in the door.